The first one I'll start with is a question from Malik Baba asking, what are the minimum requirements to join the projects as a volunteer, or do they differ from project to another? And I think, Andrew, you can answer this pretty well.
Yeah, certainly. And actually, so Raid put a little answer there too. So I'll also start with what he said. So Raid wrote that we don't have minimum requirements on skills, but they do have to match the needs of a project. We do, however, want the commitment from volunteers so the social good organizations submitting projects come out with something useful. So I think what Raid's touching on there is two super important parts of this. Is there's no minimum requirement because the skills for every project is so diverse. But number one, it's important that you have the skills to match to that project and will be able to carry it out effectively and in a way that helps the social good organization. And then number two is that you have the commitment, the availability and time commitment to carry out the project. But as long as those two things are in place, you can do what you say you can do on the project and you have the time to do it, then there's no minimum requirements.
Perfect. Thanks, Andrew. And kind of a follow-up on there, is there a procedure to become a volunteer on a specific project? I know Jessica covered how you can apply to a specific project. Can you just reference that again?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's also a little bit dependent, I will say, about the situation that we're in now. So because Solve for Good is so new, we're at a moment in time where we have way more volunteers than we do projects. So right now, the staffing for projects is a little bit slower in the sense that we have organizations sign up, and then we've kind of been going to the community and finding a few individuals to match to that project, and then putting them in touch directly. This will evolve as Solve for Good evolves. Eventually, projects will be able to be posted to the website, and then there should be enough projects available where volunteers can start to apply using the methods that Jessica just showed. So in the meantime, I think the best way is to introduce yourself on the Slack community and make yourself known with your skills. And as projects come up, we'll try and identify you from the Slack community.
Awesome, thanks. And the next question is from Justice, and I think this is a question for Raid. You touched upon this a bit, but how do you differentiate between DSSG and Solve for Good? Will there still be a DSSG fellowship? And supposing that somebody wants to volunteer, is the volunteer a commitment only for as long as the project that they're working on, or is volunteering not tied to projects? So it's kind of like, in how many different ways can people get involved with the DSSG and Solve for Good platforms? I think I'll just try and answer to the best of my ability and do my Paul and or Raid impression. So
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Paul.
I'm sorry. This is going a little bit more challenging than I thought. But I think the answer is we still foresee a role for the summer fellowship. I mean, that was conceived with the objective to find young data scientists and teach them how to do data science for social good kinds of projects. And many of you have been through that and have seen the program either as fellows or as partners, partner organizations, or as people who have been following it in the past couple of years. The main difference between the summer fellowship and what we're trying to do here at Solve is that the summer fellowship had a core educational component and was really aimed at making sure we could teach the participants, both the partner organizations as well as the fellows, what we think are the right ways to do these kinds of projects. Whereas the Solve for Good platform and this initiative really aims to solve a need that has especially accelerated now in the times of the pandemic to help organizations with any data-related problems that they face. And that means that the focus here is on building something that is useful immediately, and that means that we shift the focus a little bit from the educational efforts that we would traditionally see in the summer fellowship to the building and delivering something useful for the partner organizations. But that said, we still believe that there's a role for the summer fellowship, and we very much hope to be able to do that again next summer if everything allows that.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. The next question is from Paula, and she's asking, aside from the volunteers, are there any mentors or more experienced data scientists that the volunteers can rely on when working on one of the projects? So I'm going to take this one. Just just for fun. But one great resource that I think everyone has mentioned throughout is the Slack channel, where everyone has introduced themselves. And that's really where you can reach out to people informally and, pick their brains, introduce yourself, get a virtual coffee, talk about your experience, and also get their insights on some of the projects that you're working on. The other piece is, at least on the first few projects, how we've staffed them. They're all former fellows, or they've been involved with the fellowship or the program in some way, and have done these kind of data science projects. There's at least one or two people from that fall into that category. And as this program grows, we'll try and keep some of that spirit. So I think they have this in medicine, like when you're learning how to do a type of surgery or procedure, you watch one, you do one, you teach one. And I think that same philosophy applies really well to kind of data science fellowship and mentorship. So, when you first start your project, you'll get a little bit of guidance and then you'll do it. And then the next one, on the next round around, you may be that experienced person, and really try and grow that in an organic manner. And the next question, it's a pretty specific one. Okay, so there's a question from Amelia Morrissey, and the question is, are there any projects working on news or police record scraping to compile a race-related police brutality and officer accountability database? I didn't see it on the Solve Projects page. If not, is there a way we can start a project like that? Jessica, can you talk a little bit about how the community can bring projects if there may not be associated with an organization? And do we support that right now? Will we support in the future?
Well, I don't think we have a process in place for us bringing projects to Solve for Good right now. It's more as though you as an organization or you as volunteers have that opportunity to bring the projects to the program. We have been talking internally about, we should have a process in place though for reviewing projects and thinking about what are projects that are Solve for Good projects beyond the technical aspects of, does this look like something that's more than 3 months worth of work, or does this look like something that is something beyond a volunteer base? Yeah. So yeah, it's a good question, but that the platform is open, right? It's there aren't controls that we've placed at this time.
And Jessica, if you could stay on the line, I have a follow-up for you from Dominique. And the question is, the project setup is very involved. It seems that it may be a heavy lift for organizations to conceptualize and present a well-thought-out project. Do you provide training for organizations?
So there are some resources that we have in the resources tab around scoping. I think Andrew spoke to that a little bit earlier in the call, but it was fairly quick. And then in a couple weeks from now, we expect to talk about scoping as well. So I think that will help from the organizational side and also from the volunteer side when somebody wants to scope a project, because scoping really is a valuable and important piece, and it takes up a large part of doing this work well, right? But then there are also different types of organizations that will take part in this. So you might have a team or some team members on a project who are data scientists that could determine, well, these are what our tasks look like, and they'll be able to speak to the domain aspects well. Yeah. Whereas other times you may need to find a scoper who has more of a data science background.
Okay, awesome. That's very helpful. So the next question is from Harish. And I'm only picking that because it's very close to my name. But the question that Harish is asking is, if I'm not from a data science background, but have done some personal data science projects out of self-interest, can I still be a volunteer? And I think I'll just answer that because traditionally, I'm not exactly from a data science background. I did a master's degree in math, which, as everyone knows, is the least applied of all the disciplines. And really, all of this experience that DSSG provides, and if you're willing to learn and you're open to changing some of the ways you think and adapt, DSSG is a perfect fit for you. And so is the Solve for Good platform. So yeah, if you've learned it yourself, if you learned it on Coursera, you learned it in a class, you learned it on the job, as long as you have some background, the Solve for Good platform and the community and also the fellowship really facilitates you leveling up and, you know, also getting more comfortable in that skill set. So yes, everyone is welcome. Follow-up question from Alexandra is, what are some of the more common tasks / skills that projects need? And I'm going to throw it back to Andrew for this one, because I think he's been involved in scoping a lot of these. You just want to take that, Paul. Yeah.
So the depends a lot on the project, as you understand. Many of you work in this field. We might require a different a set of hard skills depending on what kind of problem the partner organization has posted on the Solve for Good platform. But in general, there will be, as any data science project, a couple of common things. So you'll need people that can work with the data and understand what form and shape it is, what it means. And can then take that data, combine it, and maybe train a model or visualize it or clean it or whatever the task is that the specific partner organization has posted on the platform. And we typically also, in all of the volunteering teams, the challenge teams, we also have a project manager who helps organize and coordinate the plan and the deliverables for the initiative. And sometimes when the initiative is small, this could be relatively an easy effort, but if it's a multi-week project, it's important to have somebody coordinate how the team collaborates, what the order of deliverables is, make sure that there's regular contact with the project organization, the partner organization, to be able to deliver something that is useful and usable by them at the end of it.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. That's very effective. I think one question I've seen a lot as I'm scrolling is this session going to be recorded? And yes, it will be. And hopefully on the recording, people won't have issues with the lag. So sorry if you've missed something, you should be able to go back and kind of play that piece out, and we'll post that link on the Slack. So apologies for the technical difficulties, but we're learning as we go here. There is one, I think, we've gotten through a lot of these questions, and one question I want to address is from Surab, which is about, can we get acknowledgement after the completion of the project? So I think, Paul, maybe you can use this as an opportunity to talk about some of the principles around dissemination of kind of information about the project once it's complete.
Yeah, so I'm even going to try and turn on my camera just to compensate for the earlier fail. So if you see a face, that's me. I think what we try to do at the end of each project is make sure that a couple of things happen. So first of all, there needs to be a good handover to the project partner, and that's an obvious one. After that, we want to make sure that the code and the work that's been done by the team can be shared, as we almost always have done with data science for social good projects, on a publicly accessible GitHub repository. We try to follow that same principle such that other organizations that might have similar issues, which is very often the case, can actually go and review the code, can learn from the documentation that the project teams have created. And besides that, we'll, of course, make sure it's posted on the website and communicated via the Solve platform, so others can learn from that, and also reach out in case they have questions if they're working on a similar project. And of course, if people, I'm not sure the question was if there's a way to show that you've completed it. I think we'll make sure that this is visible, one on the Solve platform, but also you're there as a contributor via our GitHub and in the other publicly available tools.
And Paul, kind of to tack on to that, when you're talking about the open source kind of community environment, that yes, that's true for the code and some of the materials that come out of it. But Akash has a question about, would organizations allow volunteers to use data for their own research after completing the project tasks? Do you think you can address that? Yeah,
that's a great question. In principle, the agreements that we set up between the volunteers and the project partners are aimed around the collaboration that's happening on the Solve for Good platform. That means that they scope a project that's posted on the platform, and then you exchange data to solve that specific challenge. But of course, once you're in contact with the organization, you are free to discuss these kinds of opportunities with the partner organizations, as you want, and agree with them a specific continuation. I mean, the idea is that we facilitate that there is a clear challenge. We facilitate the project organization meeting you as volunteers, but after that, we also count on you to execute some of that, and in that sense, don't want to constrain the community to continue to work with the partner organizations or continue things like research projects if that's of mutual interest.
Okay, awesome. And then I'm going to try and throw this back to Jessica, but Paul, if you could stay on the line, because I think we'll just wrap up after this. And it's a question from Mustafa asking if a volunteer is applying for a project, in which phase should they apply? For example, should it be in the new phase in scoping, or the obvious one, which is waiting for volunteers?
So I think that a volunteer should think about where they are best suited. So for myself, as a non-technical data science kind of person, I would be best suited as a project manager and potentially as a project scoper,
right?
Especially if an organization had a data science background. If you are highly technically skilled, then maybe you fit into all of those. If you're technically skilled, but you don't have a lot of time, maybe, and you're senior in your position, maybe you're best suited for a QA task where you can provide just some time to review code and be a mentor. So think about where you're best suited.
Okay, so it's flexible, and we can provide some guidance around that. I think that's super helpful. And then I think this may be the last question we can take, but continue to interact in the Slack and keep posting questions, and we'll try and get to those. I'm going to follow up for you again, Jessica, with a question from Gerardo. Gerardo wants to know, they work for the New York City Mayor's office and could post it as an organization, but when is a project deemed complete? And what human resources other than the volunteers are offered to organizations?
So I took you through some of these phases that happen kind of automatically. And we definitely, we owe you some documentation around that. But then there are these in-between phases, like in progress to complete, where we don't want to really provide concrete information about how to determine that. That's really, it's project by project basis. And so you want to have those conversations about deliverables with the organization to determine when is something completed, how should it be QA'd, but we can provide some more recommendations around that. For sure.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I missed the second part of that question.
Kind of what human resources other than the volunteers are offered to organizations? I think you kind of addressed it, but I think maybe the question is, what are some points of contact if people are stuck, and are they available to the organizations who want to post projects?
Oh, well, there's always the Slack channel. And so yeah, you could use the Slack channel as the main point of contact.
Okay, awesome. And then I think we'll wrap up the questions there. I just want to thank everyone for bearing with us through the technical difficulties as addressed, and the webinar will be posted. Please continue to interact with everyone in the Slack channel. Reach out to me, reach out to other people you've heard present. And I think I'm just going to pass this off to Paul to give us some, some really moralizing few closing remarks.
Sure. So there's a little I can add, to be honest. I think what you saw today was the launch of the Summer Solve Summer Academy. And this is the first in a series of events that we try to prepare for the community and get you all started. We hope that this was useful. We'll try to do our best to overcome some of these technical difficulties, and we'll continue to share some of the projects that we're starting to work on. With the hope that some of you will submit projects for the volunteer community to start working on, and for those of you that are volunteers, to reach out, register on the Solve platform, and we'll do our best to match you to a challenge as soon as we can. And I think with that, we will end it here, and look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. stay tuned and let us know if you have any questions over Slack. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone.